Hi, Mama. We are back. We are back with the mysticism of sound and music, the Sufi teaching of Hazrat Inayat Khan. And we're starting off on Chapter 7, the spiritual significance of color and sound. It seems that what science realizes in the end, mysticism teaches from the beginning. This accords with the saying of Christ, "First, seek ye the kingdom of God, and all will be added." When one hears of the present discoveries about sound and color on the scientific side, one begins by being surprised. One says, what a new discovery, something we've never heard of. It's something quite new. And yet when you open the Bible, there it says, first was the Word, and the Word was God. And if you open still older scriptures of the Vedanta, you read in their verses that in the Creator there was that word or that vibration. When we come to the Quran, we read that first there was the word be, and then there became. The religions of the world, the prophets and mystics who existed ages ago, knew these things. Today a man comes with a little photographic plate and says, here I have a photograph of sound that shows how important is vibration and its action upon the plate. He does not know that this is something that has always been known and has been spoken of by those who knew it, but in spiritual terms. Therefore, man does not think about what was spoken of in the past. He thinks that what is being spoken of today is something new. When we realize that, as Solomon has said, there is nothing new under the sun, we begin to enjoy life, seeing how time after time the same wisdom is revealed to man. The one who seeks through science, the one who searches through religion, the one who finds it through philosophy, the one who finds it through mysticism, in whatever manner they seek the truth, they find it in the end. I was once introduced in New York to a scientist, a philosopher. The first thing he said about his accomplishments was, I have discovered the soul. It amused me very much. All the scriptures have spoken about it. Thinkers have spoken about it. Mystics have spoken about it. The prophets have spoken about it. And this man comes and says, I have discovered this soul. I thought, yes, that was the new discovery that we were expecting, something that we never knew. Such is the attitude of mind today, the childish attitude. When one looks into the past, the present, and the future, one sees that life is eternal, and what one can discover is that which has always been discovered by those who seek. Philosophy or science, mysticism or esotericism will all agree on one point if they touch the summit of their knowledge, and that point is that behind the whole of creation, behind the whole of manifestation, if there is any subtle trace of life that can be found, it is motion, it is movement, it is vibration. This motion has its two aspects. There are two aspects because we have developed two principal faculties, sight and hearing. One aspect appeals to our hearing, the other to our sight. The aspect of movement or vibration that appeals to our hearing is what we call audible and what we term sound. The aspect that appeals to our sight, we call light, we call it color, we call it visible. In point of fact, all that is visible, all that is audible, what is it in its origin? It is motion. It is movement. It is vibration. It is one and the same thing. Therefore, even in that which is audible, in that which is called sound, those who can see trace color, and to those who can hear, even the sound of the color is audible. Is there anything that unites these two things? Yes, there is. And what is it? It is harmony. It is not a particular color that is harmonious or that lacks harmony. It is the blending of that color. It is in what frame it is fixed, how the color is arranged. In accordance with that, it has its effect upon the one who sees, and so it is with sound. There is not any sound that is harmonious or inharmonious in itself. It is the relation of one sound with another sound that creates harmony. Therefore, harmony is not a thing that one can point out. One cannot say, this or that certain thing is harmony. Harmony is a fact. Harmony is the result of the relation between color and color, the relation between sound and sound, and the relation between color and sound. The most interesting part of this knowledge is how to different persons, different colors appeal, and how different people enjoy different sounds. The more one studies this, the more one finds its relation with the particular advancement of man's evolution. For one will find that at a certain time of one's evolution, one loved a certain color, and then one lost contact with that color. With one's growth and evolution in life, one begins to like some other color. It also depends upon a person's condition, whether he is emotional, passionate, romantic, warm, or cold, whether sympathetic or disagreeable. Whatever be his emotional condition, in accordance with that, he has his likes or dislikes in colors. Therefore, that makes it easy for the seer, for the knower, to read the character of a man even before he has seen his face, only by seeing his clothes. His liking for a certain color expresses what the person is like. His liking for a certain flower, for a certain gem or jewel, for a certain environment in his room, the color on his wall, all that shows what a person is like, what is his fancy. As man evolves spiritually through life, so his choice of color changes. With each step forward, he changes. His idea about color becomes different. There are some to whom striking colors appeal, to other pale colors. The reason is that the striking colors have intense vibrations. The pale colors have smooth and harmonious vibrations, and it is according to the emotional condition of man that he enjoys different colors. Now, coming to sound. Every person, whether he knows it or not, has a certain choice of sound. Now, coming to sound. Every person, whether he knows it or not, has a certain choice of sound. Although everyone does not study this subject, a man mostly remains ignorant of this idea, yet every person has a liking for a certain sound. It is therefore that there is a saying, a belief among people, that each person has his note. It is a fact that each person has his sound, a sound that is akin to his particular evolution. Besides the divisions that the singers have made, such as tenor, bass, or baritone, each person has his particular pitch, and each person has his peculiar note in which he speaks, and that peculiar note is expressive of his life's evolution, expressive of his soul, of the condition of his feelings, and of his thoughts. It not only has an effect upon children to hear certain sounds and to see certain colors, but it also has an effect upon animals. Colors have a great effect and influence upon all living creatures, animals, birds, and human beings. Without knowing it, the influence of colors works in their lives, turning them toward this or that inclination. Once, when I was visiting a house that had been taken by a certain club, one of the members told me, "It is a very great pity that since we have taken this house, there is always disagreement in our committee." I said, "No wonder. I see it." They asked why. I said, "The walls are red. They make you inclined to fight." A striking color from all around gives you the inclination to disagree. The emotions are touched by it, and certainly those inclined to disagreement are helped by it. It is from this psychological point of view that one finds among the ancient customs of the East that a certain color is chosen for the time of wedding and certain colors for other times of different festivities. It all has its meaning. There's a psychological significance at the back of it. Since both color and sound are perceived differently, and we have different senses through which to perceive them, we've distinguished between visible and audible things. But in reality, those who meditate, who concentrate, those who go within themselves, who trace the origin of life, they begin to see that behind these outer five senses, there is one sense hidden. And this sense is capable of doing all that which we seem to do or experience. We distinguish five external senses because we know the five organs of sense. In reality, there is one sense. It is that sense that, through these five different organs, experiences life and distinguishes life in five different forms. And so all that is audible and all that is visible is one and the same. It is this that is called in Sanskrit Purusha and Prakriti. In the terms of the Sufis, this is known as Zat and Sifat. The manifestation of this, the outer appearance, is called Sifat. It is in the manifestation of Sifat that one sees the distinction or the difference between that which is visible and that which is audible. In the real aspect of being, they are one and the same. And that plane of existence where they are one and the same is called Zat. According to that knowledge of the inner existence of the Sufi mystics, in which one sees the source and goal of all things. What I wish principally to explain is that color and sound are a language that can be understood not only in the external life, but also in the inner life. For the physician and for the chemist, color has a great significance. The deeper one goes into the science of medicine and into the science of chemistry, the more one recognizes the value of color. Each element, the development of every object or the change of every object, is distinguishable by the changing of its color. The physicians of old used to recognize diseases by the color of face and form, and even today there exist physicians whose principal way of recognizing a man's complaint is from the color in his eyes, on his tongues, on his nails, on his skin. In every condition, it is color that is expressive of a man's condition. Also, in objects, their condition and their change are recognized by their change of color. Psychologists have recognized the condition of objects by their sound, and of persons by their voice. What kind of a person a man is, whether strong or weak, what his character is, what his inclinations are, what his attitude is towards life, his outlook on life, all this is known and understood by his voice. Color and sound are not only the language in which one communicates with the life without, but also the language in which one communicates with the life within. One might ask how it is done. We can see the answer in certain scientific experiments. Special plates are made, and by speaking near such a plate, marks are made upon the plate with sound and vibrations. Those marks make either harmonious or inharmonious forms. Parenthetically, I think he's talking about vinyl records, like phonograph records, are the plates that he's referring to. I think this is written in the 1920s. If that is true, then every person from morning till evening is making invisible forms in space by what he says. He is creating invisible vibrations around him, and so he is producing an atmosphere. Therefore, it is that one person may come into the house, and before he speaks, you are tired of him. You wish to get rid of him. Before he has said or done anything, you are finished with him. You would like him to go away, for in his atmosphere, he is creating a sound. A sound is going on that is disagreeable. There's another person with whom you feel sympathy, to whom you feel drawn, whose friendship you value, whose presence you long for. Harmony is continually created through him. That is sound too. If that is true, then it is not only the external signs, but also the inner condition that is audible and visible. Though not visible to the eyes and not audible to the ears, yet it is audible and visible in the soul. We say, I feel his vibrations. I feel the person's presence. I feel sympathy or antipathy toward that person. There is a feeling. And a person creates a feeling without having said anything or done anything. Therefore, a person who is in a wrong vibration, without doing or saying anything wrong, creates the wrong atmosphere, and you find fault with him. It is most amusing and very funny to see how people may come to you with a complaint. I have said nothing, I have done nothing, and yet people dislike me and are against me. That person does not know that it is not because of his saying or doing anything. It is because of his being. What you are speaks louder than what you say. It is life itself that has its tone, its color, its vibration. It speaks aloud. One may think, where is it? What is it? Where is it to be found? The answer is, what little man knows about himself is only about his body. If you tell a man to point out where he is, he will point out this arm, this hand, this body. He knows little further than that. There are many who have asked, where is it in your body that you think? Will say, thinking? In my brain. They limit themselves to that little physical region that is called body, thus making themselves smaller than what they really are. The reality is that man is one individual with two ends, just like one line with two ends. If you look at the ends, it is two. If you look at the line, it is one. One end of the line is limited. It is limitedness. The other end of the line is unlimited. One end is man, the other end is God. Man forgets this end and knows only that end of which he is conscious, and it is the consciousness of limitedness that makes him more limited. Otherwise, he would have a greater scope for approaching that unlimited that is within himself, that is only the other end of the same line, the line that he calls, or what he considers to be, himself. When a mystic speaks of self-knowledge, this does not mean knowing how old I am, or how good I am, or how bad I am, or how right I am, or wrong I am. It means knowing the other part of one's being, that deeper, subtler aspect of one's being. It is upon the knowledge of that being that the fulfillment of life depends. One might ask, how can one draw closer to it? The way that has been found by those who searched after truth, those who sought God, those who wish to analyze themselves, those who wish to sympathize with life, is one way, and that is the way of vibrations. It is the same way as of old, by the help of sound they prepared themselves. They made these physical atoms, which in time had become deadened, live again with the help of sound. They worked with the power of sound. As Zeb-un-Nisa says, say continually that sacred name that will make thee sacred. The Hindus have called it mantra yoga. The Sufis have termed it wazifa. It is the power of the word that works upon each atom of the body, making it sonorous, making it a medium of communication between the external life and the inner life. What one begins to realize as the first experience of one's spiritual development is that one begins to feel in communication with living beings, not only with human beings, but with animals, with birds, with trees, with plants. It is not an old tale that the saints used to speak with the trees and the plants. You can speak with them today if you are in communication. It was not only the ancient times that were blessed. The blessing that was of old is there today. The old blessing is not old today. It is new. It is the same one that was, that is, and that will be. No privilege was ever limited to a period of the world's history. Man has the same privilege today if he will recognize that he is privileged. When he himself closes his heart, when he allows himself to be covered by the life within and without, no doubt he becomes exclusive. No doubt he becomes cut away from this whole manifestation that is one whole and is not divided. It is man himself who divides himself. If not, life is undivided, indivisible. It is the opening of the communication with external life that makes man wider. Then he does not say of his friend, "This is my friend, I love him." But he says, "This is myself, I love him." That is the time when he can say that he has arrived at the realization of love. As long as he says, "I feel sympathy with him because he is my friend," his sympathy has not yet fully awakened. The real awakening of his sympathy is on that day when he sees his friend and says, "This is myself." Then the sympathy is awakened. Then there is communication within oneself. Man does not close himself only from the external life, but also from the inner part that is a still more important part of his life. That inner part is also sound. That inner part is light. And when one gets in touch with this sound and this light, then one knows that language that is the language of heaven, a language that is expressive of the past, the present, and the future, a language that reveals the secret and character of nature, a language that is receiving and giving the divine message that the prophets have tried at times to reveal. Chapter 8, The Ancient Music. When one looks at this subject from the Eastern point of view, one finds that the Eastern idea of music originated from intuition. But the tradition of any art, or even of science, will tell the same thing. It is only later on that man begins to believe in the outer things and forgets the origin, which is intuition. Music, according to the ancient people, was not a mechanical science or art. Music was the first language. The proof of this can be found even now in the language of the animals and birds who express their emotions and passions to one another without words, only in sounds. It is the combination of the different sounds of animals and birds that also has an effect upon the numberless multitudes of the lower creation. If music was the first expressive thing in the lower creation, so it was also in the humankind. And since it was the first expression of the emotions and passions of the heart, it is also the last expression of the emotions and passions, for what art cannot express, poetry explains, and what poetry cannot express is expressed by music. To a thinker, therefore, music in all ages will stand on the highest pedestal for the expression of what is deepest in oneself. When the ancient music is compared with the modern, one will no doubt find that there is too vast a gulf between them. If there's anything that gives one some little idea of the music of the human race, it is Eastern music, which still has traces of ancient music in it. Had it been preserved in the East only as music, it would perhaps not have been kept intact as it has been. But it was kept as part of the religion, and that is the reason why it has been continued through the tradition for thousands of years. One might ask, how can the music of ancient times be kept pure, as there is always a tendency in human nature to alter things? It was always difficult for the human race to change religion. Anything else might be changed, but there was one thing that was always kept, and that was religion. In the religion of the Hindus, one aspect was music. It was called Samaveda. In the Western world, there came a time when translations were made of the Vedas, but there is a part of them of which the translation is not to be found. It is of that Veda. The reason is that being musical, this Samaveda could not well be regarded as being language. From a study of the music of the Hindus, One can trace back in the traditions that thousands of years ago there was a time when musicians knew as fine a distance between tones as quarter tones. It was not only the degree of the sound that was considered in that way, but also the nature and character of the sound was analyzed, just as in chemistry. We can find today in ancient traditions the different effects attached to the different notes, whether dryness or liquidity, whether cold or heat. No doubt it is difficult today to distinguish the sounds that express these different effects because the distinguishing is now done from the instruments. In those times, it was done only from nature. Yet it is most interesting to know that we find today in Sanskrit scriptures the different pitch of sound distinguished in ancient times. In the absence of a piano or of a tuning fork, the musicians had to determine the pitch by the sound of different animals and birds. One might ask in what way the art developed among the ancient people, reference to which is to be found even now in the East. The idea was that they attached different themes of music to different seasons and different strains of music to different times of the day and night. And as there is nothing in the world that is without reason, that also was not only an imagination or fancy. There was a reason behind it, a logical reason for attributing certain melodies to certain times. Had it been a poetic fancy, it would have lasted for a short period and would have influenced a little circle only, but it has lasted for ages until now and has influenced the whole country of India. It is a usage that was carried on for thousands of years, and today one finds in the east or the west, the north or the south, that the same raga is sung in the same times. When sung out of these times, then it is not appealing. And when we look at it from the metaphysical point of view, we shall find that the realization and knowledge that science has today and will ever have, that vibration is at the root of the whole creation, was a certainty to the ancient people. It was the basis of their whole science. They knew that that which was created and which is holding and in which is held the whole manifestation and the whole cosmos is one power, and that is vibration. It is because of this that astrological science, which had much to do with the way human beings in different countries were influenced, also arose out of that science of vibration. Thus, music as a science was known by them to have a great deal to do with the influence of the planets, and the continual moving and working of the planets and their action upon the earth were the basis of the ragas on which their music was founded. In the Sanskrit tradition of ancient times, there were verses to be found having relation to certain planets. The musicians therefore made their program according to the influence of the planets of the cosmos, and that program was carried out throughout the whole year. One might think that the influence of the planets is too vague to perceive and that one could not make a program upon it, but in all periods of the whole of humanity, in all periods, the whole of humanity has arranged its life according to the planetary influences just the same. In order to keep their music akin to nature, it was necessary to give liberty to the singer and player to sing and play as he wished. Naturally, uniformity was lacking, and a standardized system could not be made. This is why this music always remained an individualistic art only, not an education. For this reason, the music of the ancient people had its advantages and a great many disadvantages. The advantages were this: a musician, a singer or player, was never bound to sing in a certain particular way in order to execute properly the music he wanted to play before the public, but was always free to give the music according to his inspiration at the time. It gave him full liberty to express his emotions, his passions, without any outward restrictions that he should obey. When there were a number of singers or players, no doubt it was then necessary to set a certain standard. Yet that standard did not restrict them very much. It is this order that was called music. The word music, or Sanjita in Sanskrit, has three aspects. One aspect is language, the other aspect is playing, and the third aspect is movement. Hindus have never separated the science of movement or dance from music. They've always combined the three aspects of what they call music. As the music of the Eastern people developed, each of these three aspects developed also. For instance, the way of singing of the more refined people was quite different from the way that the peasants sang. The song of the temple was altogether different from the song of the stage. These differences were great. Not only were there particular rules and regulations to be followed or more mechanical differences, but there was a natural difference. The most important or valuable thing that the music of the ancient people produced and that greatly benefited humanity was that they distinguished the different aspects of music and thereby came to realize that there was a certain way of expressing the tone and rhythm that brought about a greater emotion or an inclination toward action. Together with it, they found out that there was a certain use of time and rhythm that brought about a greater equilibrium and a greater poise. This science, developing after many years of practice, formed in itself a special psychological science or art called yoga. And the special name for this science was called mantra yoga. The meaning of the word yoga is unity or connection, and mantra yoga means the sacred union between the outer life and the deeper life. For the yogis found out that there are psychological inclinations. One of the tendencies of the breath is to go outward, the other inclination is to go inward. These two tendencies are to be found in nature also, in the ebb and the flow, in the sunset and the sunrise. One sees this difference in oneself. The vibrations of one's own body and action are very different in the morning and in the evening. The yogis therefore regulate the rhythm of the circulation of the heart and of every action of the breath with the help and by the vibration of music, of tone and rhythm both. This brought them from the audible vibrations to the inward vibrations, which means from sound to breath, which in the language of the Hindus are one and the same. It is Sura that is a name for sound and for breath. The one blends into the other because it is the same thing in the end. It is the breath of an object that may be called a sound, and it is the audibility of the breath that may be called voice. Therefore, breath and voice are not two things. Even breath and sound are not two things, if one can understand that both have the same basis. Is there an explanation of why man rejoices or why he is impressed by the music played to him? Is it only an amusement or a pastime? No, there is something else besides it. The principal reason is that in man there is a perpetual rhythm going on, which is the sign of life in him, a rhythm that is expressed in his pulsation and in his heartbeats, even in his heart. Upon this rhythm depends his health, not only his health, but his moods. Therefore, anywhere, a continued rhythm must have an effect upon every person, and upon every person its effect is distinct and different. It is amusing and interesting to know that when the jazz band came into existence, everyone said to his friends, "Something crazy has come into society." Yet one has not resisted it. It has come more and more into fashion, and however much a person hates it and is prejudiced against its name, he at least likes to stand and listen to it for 5 minutes. What is the reason? The reason is that in whatever form the rhythm is emphasized upon the body and the mind of man, it has a psychological effect. It is said of a very great Persian poet who was also a mystic, that when he got into a certain mood, he used to make circles around a pillar that stood in the middle of his house. He then began to speak. People would write down what he said, and it would be perfect poetry. And what is the most amusing is that I have known of a lawyer who, when pleading at the bar and being unable to find an argument, would turn himself around. After that, he would find the right argument. But in order to find a mystery, we need not go to such cases. A person who cannot find an idea beats or taps with his fingers on the table and the idea comes. Many who cannot get a hold of their thoughts begin to walk about the room. When they've made 2 or 3 turns, their thoughts become clear. If this is true, we come to the realization that the human body is a kind of mechanism that must go on regularly. If it is stopped in some way, there is something stopped in the body or in the mind. This brings us to understand that upon the rhythm, the mood, health, and condition of man's mind depend, not only upon the rhythm that he gets from music, but also upon the rhythm of his own breath. This rhythm has also a great deal to do with the rhythm of man's life. There are certain kinds of sound that irritate man and have a bad effect upon the nerves, and there are other kinds of rhythm that have a soothing, healing, and comforting effect upon the mind. Music is sound and rhythm, and when sound and rhythm are understood in their nature and character, then music is not only something used as a pastime, but then music will become a source of healing and upliftment. The Sufis of ancient times, the great mystics, used to develop this art in order to bring about poise in life after their everyday activity. They called this art Sama, and Sama has been the most sacred thing for the Sufis. It has been a meditation for them. They meditated by the help of music, by having a certain music played that had a certain effect upon the development of the individual. The great poets, such as Rumi of Persia, used to have music for their meditation, and by the help of music, they used to repose and to control the activity of their body and mind. We see today that there is a greater and greater tendency to nervousness. It is caused by too much activity in life. Life is becoming more and more artificial every day, and with each step forward, man is missing that repose that has been as yeast to the human race. Therefore, for the betterment and education of humanity today, the art of repose, which seems to be lost greatly, needs to be found. Many people in the Western world who have read about the traditions of the ancient people have often thought that there was an art that seemed to have been lost and that they should go on to the East in order to find it. So as to make it easy for those who are in search of that art and science that is most necessary in the evolution of mankind, the Sufi movement has made a facility for those who wish to study and practice it, to do so here, instead of going so far to the East for it. Chapter 9, The Divinity of Indian Music. In India, life begins with the soul. Therefore, science, art, philosophy, mysticism, all were directed to one and the same goal. Not only arts and sciences, but even professions and commerce were not without a religious view. One can imagine how, in a country where even business and profession had a spiritual view, the musician's life was full of religious thought. No part of the world, East or West, can deny the divinity of music. In the first place, music is the language of the soul, and for two people of different nations or races to unite, there is no better source than music. For music not only unites man to man, but man to God. And now the question comes, when is it that music unites man with God, and how? Belief in God has two aspects. One belief in God is that a person thinks perhaps there is a God, or, as others believe, I believe too. He does not know God by reason, nor does he see God before him. God for him is perhaps in heaven. Whether he exists or does not exist, he does not know. From one who has this kind of belief, a little confusion or disappointment or injustice takes away his belief in God, and it is for this reason that thousands and thousands of men who worshipped God gave up their belief in God. And there's another aspect of belief, and that belief is the realization of God's presence, not only in the heavens, but in one's own surroundings. When a person arrives at this point, his belief becomes a living entity. To him, God is not only a judge or a sustainer. To him, he is a friend who hears the cry of his soul in the solitude and knows the best and greatest secret he has in his heart, a friend upon whom he can always rely in good and bad experiences, and even in the hereafter. For a musician, music is the best way to unite with God. A musician with a belief in God brings to God the beauty and the perfume and the color of his soul. From the metaphysical point of view, there is nothing that can touch the formless except that art of music that in itself is formless. There is another point of view that the innermost being of man is the akasha, which means capacity. Therefore, all that is directed within from the external world can reach this realm, and music can reach it still more. A third point of view is that the creation has come from vibrations which the Hindus have called nada. In the Bible, we find it as the word that was first. On this point, all the different religions unite. It is therefore that man loves music more than anything else. Music is his nature. It has come from vibrations, and he himself is a vibration. There are two aspects of life. The first is that man is tuned by his surroundings, and the second is that man can tune himself in spite of his surroundings. This latter is the work of the mystic. The Sufis in the East work for years together to tune themselves. By the help of music, they tune themselves to the spheres where they wish to be. The yogis do the same. Therefore, the beginning of music in India was at the time of Shiva, Lord of the yogis. This great yogi teacher taught to the world the science of breath. Among the Sufis, there was a great saint, Muinuddin Christi of Ajmer. At his grave, music is played, and Hindus and Muslims go on their pilgrimage. Hindus and Muslims go there on pilgrimage. This shows that the religion of the knowers of truth is the religion of God, and the prayer of the greatest devotee rises from his heart in the realm of music. All different methods of bringing about calm and peace can be attained through the help of music. Chapter 10. The Use Made of Music by the Sufis of the Christi order. The Sufi especially loves music. calling it Gizai Ru, food of the soul. 1. The yogis and the Sufis in their meditation have always had music. Music is the greatest mystery in the world. The whole manifestation is made of vibrations, and vibrations contain all its secret. The vibrations of music free the soul and take from a person all the heaviness that keeps him bound. Music reaches the soul in a moment, as the telegraph reaches from London to New York. There is one difference between the Sufis and the yogis and all the other mystics. Their ideas, their thoughts, and their life are quite the same. But you will see the Sufis sometimes in tears and sometimes in joy. Worldly persons think they are mad, and the mystics may think they're on the surface, they're not on the same level. To the Sufi, self-pity, tears at what happens to the self are haram, prohibited, but tears in the thought of the beloved, in the realization of some truth, are allowable. Extreme joy for what happens to the self is not allowable, but joy in the thought of the beloved is allowable. The heart is touched and is moved by the thought of God. It is then that the dervishes dance. Sometimes the dance expresses the action of the beloved. Sometimes it is the face of the beloved. The Sufis have used music not as an amusement, but as purification, as prayer to God. The Christian order of Sufis especially uses music. This order exists chiefly in India and has come from Russia. Krishti in Russian means pure, and Sufi, Safa, means pure. There are different means of purification. It is according to our view that all seems good or that all seems bad. The old Greek motto says, evil is to him who thinks evil. What may seem an amusement, something light, is prayer to God. The different ways of praying to God, and sometimes when the world was most interested in music, art, science, and an amusement, these were used to bring before people the idea of something higher. Music and plays have been used, and the churches used some sort of show. If you go among people of other occupations, you will find them cold. They will pay little attention. They will speak just one word to you. But the heart of the musicians, who have to do with sound, is warmed by sound. 2. Once when I was sitting in the presence of Shakir Ali Ebaganj, the very great mystic, I asked him whether he knew the Sufis of Afghanistan. He had traveled very far. He had said, they are Christis, but they do not like music. This astonished me very much because the Christis have a great devotion for music. He explained that the cold climate of Afghanistan does not allow music to have its effect. The Christian order of the Sufis makes a great use of music to warm the heart, to produce feeling. When a person has understood that everything in the world is false, that every being is untrue, when this wisdom comes, then coldness comes. A little child is very magnetic because of its warmth. It is friendly to everyone. When its intelligence grows, it distinguishes. This one favored me. That one did not favor me. This one was kind. That one was not kind. This one gave. That one did not give. Then coldness comes. Then we think, this one is my enemy. I should not speak with him. This man has written an article against me, therefore I should have nothing to do with him. This man's grandfather was my father's enemy, therefore I should avoid him. The The selfishness and coldness grow in us to such an extent. To stop this coldness, to produce feeling, the Christies use music. The vibrations of sound produce warmth. When I was traveling through Russia, I made this prayer. Oh God, do not let anyone who is poor come here. For anyone who is poor, the cold is terrible. If he has no shoes, he has to bind a bundle of rags around his feet. If he has no fire in the house, if he has no warm coat, if he has to go out to work, or if she has to go out to work thinly clad, it is terrible. Chapter 11. The use made of music by the dancing dervishes. Dervishes are those among Sufis who adopt a certain method of progressing through the spiritual path and who try to live a life as far away from the midst of the world as possible. Dervishes are also called fakirs and are most powerful. They have the power of wonder-working and the power of insight. They are dreamers and lovers of God. They worship God in nature, especially in human nature. Among the many ways of spiritual development, they have one way called sama, which is listening to music. They listen to music in an assembly of initiates. No non-initiate is allowed to enter their assembly. They address one another saying, "O King of Kings, O Sovereign of Sovereigns," and they are mostly clad in robes or patches or in rags. They never think of tomorrow. Their thought is only for the moment, to quench the thirst of the moment and to satisfy the hunger of the time. The care of tomorrow they leave to the morrow. It is with just now that they are concerned, if they are at all concerned with life. They are the ones who are really entitled to enjoy the beauty of music, whose spirit and soul are responsive with open centers, who make themselves as a medium of resonance of the music they hear. Therefore, music touches them differently from any other person. Music touches the depth of their being. Thus, moved by music, they manifest different conditions termed by Sufis hal, which means condition. Whoever among them is moved by spirit may manifest the ecstasy which is called wajd, in the form of tears, sighs, or dance. It is therefore that those who do not understand the meaning of their dance call them howling dervishes or dancing dervishes. The gold of heaven is dust to the worldly man, and the gold of the earth is as dust to the heavenly man. To either, the gold of the other means nothing but dust. Their coins are not interchangeable. Therefore, the bliss of the dervish is understood by very few. What one can learn from this is the theory of the whole process of their spiritual development. By making God their beloved and by seeing God in the sublimity of nature, they create the presence of God. As the whole day's affairs in life consist of both joy and pain, so the life of the dervish is also filled with both joy and pain in the presence of God. And by the help of concentration, of poetry and music, both joy and pain are felt more deeply. Therefore, God becomes living to the dervish. His presence is before him in all his moods. When once his pain has had an outlet in some form or other in the sama, the musical ceremony, the condition that follows, is that of deeper insight into life. Upon whatever object or person he may cast his glance, these reveal to his soul their deepest nature, character, and secret, this making the whole of life clear to his vision in the light of God. Question: what do you mean by joy and pain in the presence of God? Why should there be pain? Hazrat answers: if there were no pain, one would not enjoy the experience of joy. It is pain that helps one to experience joy. Everything is distinguished by its opposite. The one who feels pain deeply is capable of experiencing joy. If you would ask me personally, I would say, if there is no pain, life would be most uninteresting to me, for it is by pain that the heart is penetrated, and the sensation of pain is a deeper joy. Without pain, the great ones, the great musicians, poets, dreamers, and thinkers would not have reached that stage that they reached, and would not have moved the world. If they had always had joy, they would not have touched the depths of life. And what is pain? Pain, in the real sense of the word, is the deepest joy. If one has imagination, one can enjoy tragedy more than comedy. Comedy is for children. Tragedy is for the grown-up. It is through pain that a person becomes an old soul. A person may be young in age, but deep in thought. Question: not thinking of tomorrow, living in the thought of the moment, is also taught by Christ. But can it be the ideal for a nation whose life must be built upon organization? Answer: the path of spiritual attainment is not to be journeyed by nations. Spiritual progress is individual progress, every individual in his own direction. The teaching of Christ, in this respect, also was individualistic. Chapter 12: The Science and Art of Hindu Music. Music, literature, and philosophy are akin to our souls, whatever be our faith or belief or our way of looking at life. India, in the history of the world, represents a country and a people that engage themselves in the search for truth through the realm of music, philosophy, and poetry at a time when the rest of the world had not yet begun its search for truth. It is therefore necessary to study Indian music, philosophy, and poetry in order to see the foundation of words. Some linguists today state that the Sanskrit language was the origin of all language. The origin of the science of music is to be found in Sanskrit. It is a fact that not only art, but even science has its origin in intuition. And this seems to have been forgotten lately now that man is so busy with his search through matter. Undoubtedly, even the scientist is helped by intuition, although he may not recognize the fact. Scientists who have touched the depths will admit that science has its source in intuition. Intuition working in answer to the need of the mind and the body, inventing through matter things of use, and gaining a knowledge of the nature and character of things is called science. An intuition working through the beauty that is produced in the form of line and color and in the form of rhythm is called art. Therefore, the source of both science and art is intuition. Realizing this source, the Hindus based their music on intuition, and the practice of Indian music has been a culture of stimulating intuition and awakening the faculty of appreciating beauty and then expressing itself in beautiful forms. The science of Indian music has come from three sources: astrology, psychology, and mathematics. We also find in Western music that the entire science of harmony and counterpoint is derived from mathematics, and so the science of Hindu music is called by the Sanskrit word prastara, which means mathematical arrangement of rhythms and modes. In the Indian system of music, there are about 500 modes and 300 different rhythms that are used in everyday music. The modes are called ragas. There are 4 classes of ragas. One class has 7 notes, as in the natural scale of Western music. Then there are the modes of 6 notes, omitting 1 note from the 7-note raga. that gives quite another effect to the octave and has a different influence on the human mind. Then there are the ragas of 5 notes, omitting 2 notes from the scale, any 2 notes. In China, they use a scale of 4 notes, but not in India. Some say that the origin of the scale of 4 notes or 5 notes lies in the natural instinct that man shows in his discovery of instruments. The first instrument was the flute, symbolical of the human voice. It seems natural that man took a piece of reed from the forest and made in the heart of that reed 4 holes in places where he could easily put the tips of his fingers, and distances of the holes corresponding to the distances between the fingertips, and then 1 hole below. That made the raga of 5 notes. It was only later that scientists followed with the knowledge of different vibrations, but the scale of 5 notes comes naturally when a man places his hand on the reed, and a great psychological power seems to be attached to it. It has a great influence on the human nature, and this shows that the power of all things that have been derived directly from nature is much greater than when man has changed, turned, and altered them so as to make a new form of art. The science of astrology was based on the science of cosmic vibration. Everything depends on vibratory conditions, including the position of the stars and planets, individuals, nations, races, and all objects. A great deal of the secret power that the Hindus have found in the science of music has been derived from the science of astrology. Every note of Indian music corresponds with a certain planet. Every note has a certain color. Every note denotes a certain pitch of nature, a certain pitch of the animal world. The science that existed in the ancient Vedas was the science of the elements: fire, earth, water, air, ether. But these words should not be taken as meaning the same as in everyday language. The element of water, for instance, signifies the liquid state. Fire signifies heat or warmth. Through this science, the Hindus were able to construct ragas or modes to be sung or played at a certain time of the day or night or a certain season. After these songs have been sung for thousands of years, the race has developed such a sense of appreciation of these ragas that even an ordinary man in the street cannot bear to hear a raga of the morning sung in the evening. He may not know the form of the notes, but to his ears it sounds disagreeable. He cannot stand it. We may say it is a matter of habit and that it is true, but I have made experiments with different ragas and found that a mode that should be sung in the middle of the night loses its beautiful influence if we sing it at noon. Every planet has a certain influence, and there must be a certain mode to answer it. If it is not so, then music may become a pastime, but it does not do the work for which music is designed. To an Indian, music is not an amusement or only for entertainment. It's something more than that. Music for the Indian is the food of his soul. It answers the deepest demand of his soul. Man is not only a physical body. Man has a mind, and behind the mind there is the soul. It's not only the body that hungers for food. The mind hungers for food. The soul hungers for food. What generally happens is that man only ministers to his bodily needs and gives no attention to his inner existence and its demands. He experiences momentary satisfaction, then hungers again, not knowing that the soul is the fineness of man's being. And so that unconscious craving of the soul remains. In the undeveloped person, that silent craving of the soul causes him to be disagreeable, restless, irritated. He does not feel contented with anything in life. He feels like quarreling and fighting. In the person of fine feeling, this hunger of the soul expresses itself in depression or despair. He finds some satisfaction in love of reading, love of art. The soul feels buried in the outer material world, and the soul feels satisfied in living when it is touched with the fine vibrations. The finest matter is spirit, and the grossest spirit is matter. Music, being the finest of arts, helps the soul to rise above differences. It unites souls because even words are not necessary. Music stands beyond words. The art of Hindu music is unique in its character, for every player or singer is given perfect freedom in expressing his soul through his art. The character of the Indian nation can be understood through its spirit of individualism. The whole education tends to individualism, to express oneself in whatever form one is capable of. Therefore, in some ways to their disadvantage, in many ways to their advantage, the Indians have expressed this freedom. Uniformity has its advantages, but it very often paralyzes progress in art. There are two ways of life, uniformity and individualism. Uniformity has its strength, but individualism has its beauty. When one hears an artist, a singer of Hindu music, the first thing he does is to tune his tambura to give one chord, and while he tunes his tambura, he tunes his own soul. This has such an influence on his hearers that they can wait patiently for 15 minutes. Once he finds that he is in tune with his instrument, with that note, his soul, mind, and body all seem to be one with the instrument. A person with a sensitive heart listening to his song, even a foreigner, will perceive the way the artist sings into that chord, the way he tunes his spirit to that chord. By the time he's concentrated, by that time he has attuned himself to all who are here. Not only has he tuned the instrument, but he has felt the need of every soul in the audience and the demands of their souls, what they want at that time. Perhaps not every musician can do this, but the best can. Then he synthesizes and it all comes automatically. As he begins his song, it seems that it touches every person in the room, for it is all an answer to the demands of the souls who are sitting there. He's not made a program for the music beforehand. He does not know what he will sing next, but every moment he's inspired to sing a certain song or to play a certain mode, becomes an instrument of the whole cosmic system, open to all inspiration that comes at one with his audience, in tune with the chord of the tambura. And it is not only music that he gives to the people, but a phenomena in itself. The ancient traditional songs of India and those composed by great masters have been handed down through the ages from father to son. The way music is taught is different from the Western way. Music is not always written, it is taught by imitation. The teacher sings and the pupil imitates, so all the intricacies and subtleties are learned by imitation. It is the mystical part that has been the secret of all religions. The great ones of this world, such as Christ, Buddha, and others, have come from time to time to be examples for the people and to express that perfection that is the object of every soul. The secret that was hidden behind all these great religions and in the work of these great teachers was that man should reach that utmost height that is called perfection. And it is this principle that is taught from the first lesson the musician gives to his pupil. The pupil not only imitates the teacher, but he focuses his spirit upon the spirit of the teacher. And he not only learns, but he inherits from this spirit. The lack we find today, in spite of all spiritual awakening, the reason why so many seekers after truth do not come to a satisfactory result, is that they always pursue outwardly. They take it from a book, and they learn it from a teacher. There was a time in the East, and this exists even now, when a little boy who went to learn from a teacher had a great regard for the teacher. His respect, his attitude toward his teacher was as toward his priest. And therefore, in this manner, he learned to value and appreciate and respect knowledge. And not only did he learn, but he inherited knowledge from the teacher. It is most wonderful to read about the lives of the great singers of India, how they imitated their teachers, and how they sometimes became even greater than their teachers. The object of Indian music is the training of mind and soul, for music is the best way of concentration. When you tell a person to concentrate on a certain subject, the very act of trying to concentrate makes his mind more disturbed. But music, which attracts the soul, keeps the mind concentrated. If only one knows how to appreciate it and to give one's mind to it, keeping all other things away, one naturally develops the power of concentration. Besides the beauty of music, there is that tenderness that brings life to the heart. For a person of fine feelings, for a person of kindly thought, life in the world is very trying. It is jarring, and sometimes it has a freezing effect. It makes the heart, so to speak, frozen. In that condition, one experiences depression, and the whole life becomes distasteful. The very life that is meant to be heaven becomes a place of suffering. If one can focus one's heart on music, it's just like heating something that was frozen. The heart comes to its natural condition, and the rhythm regulates the beating of the heart, which helps to restore a health of body, mind, and soul, and brings them to their proper tone. The joy of life depends upon the perfect tuning of mind and soul. Chapter 13, the connection between dance and music. 1. Indian music, which is called Sangita, is divided into 3 sections: Gayan, or singing, Vadan, or playing, and Nirtan, or dancing. But the vibration takes 3 forms of expression: in the voice in singing, in sound in playing, and in movements in dancing. Singing, however, is considered to be the principal part in Sangita. Sangita in these 3 sections forms part of Hindu worship, and even the paradise of the Hindus contains players, singers, and dancers. Musicians and dancers are used to playing, singing, and dancing in the temples of India. It may be surprising that a dancer should be dancing in the temple, but travelers in the East will know that in the Hindu temples, musicians and dancers dance and play in praise of God. According to our view, all things may seem to us high or low, praiseworthy or not. So-called religious people who condemn all enjoyable occupations have always called dancing sin. The whole world is the manifestation of God, and we may see God in all. The musician praises God in his music. The painter and sculptor see the praise of God in their paintings and statues, and the dancers too may devote their dancing to the praise of God. 2. The word dance has been much debased because the dance has been taken up by mainly entertainers who have made it of an amusement. And we see that when a thing is made into an amusement, it always degenerates. The voice that comes from the lungs and the abdomen cannot express itself fully without the bones of the head, the lips, the teeth, the tongue, the palate. So we see that this body is an instrument of sound. When the tree swings in the wind, each leaf gives a sound. The breeze alone cannot produce the full sound. The leaves of the tree rustle and become the instrument for the air. This shows us that the whole framework of this world is the instrument of sound. If, while speaking to you, I remained as still as a statue, my words would have much less effect than when accompanied by gesture. If a person says, "Go away from here," and does not move, his words will not have much expression. If he moves his arm, they will have more expression. In India, the pupil is taught to sing with gestures. These take the place of notation and guide him. A person might think notation would be a much surer method, but Indian music is so complicated that no notation can render it exactly. Then, too, the intervals are all filled up, and the movements of the hand and arm can express and guide more easily than any written signs. The third part of music, dancing, is not the made-up dance, but the expression through movement. Mahadeva, the greatest avatar himself danced. If you sing or play it to a dervish, he may begin to move his head and move his hands. A great Indian poet, when speaking of what a singer should be, says, he must have a good voice, he must know the ragas and be able to sing them. He must be a master of graceful movements. He must be calm, unaffected by the audience. He must impress the audience. Our life is so full of occupations that we have little time to observe animals. If we did, we should see that most of their language is movement. They speak little with one another. Mostly they express through their motions. If you call a dog, the dog will at once begin to wag its tail. It will move its whole body to show its joy and affection. If you speak roughly to the dog, the whole body shows that it feels sorry. If the cat is pleased or becomes angry, it shows its feelings at once by its movements. We waste much energy in useless speech. Among the old races, we see that a motion of the hands, an inclination of the head, takes the place of words for many things. As soon as a person comes into the room, we see by his movement, by his manner of walking, what he is, how much refinement he has. If we compare the horse whose price is 5,000 guineas with the horse whose price is 50 guineas, we see what a difference there is in their movements. The horse of 5,000 guineas has not been taught to move as he moves, but in every movement he is graceful. We see also that the beauty given to the peacock has inspired its graceful movements. 3. Dance is a very wonderful thing and is in itself a great proof of mysticism. We have each of us in us the nature of the bird and the nature of the animal. The nature of the bird is to fly. The nature of the animal is to jump. The tiger will jump from here to the top of the wall. If we cannot do this, it is because by eating, drinking, sleeping, we have lost the power to do it. If a man sits in an armchair, and to get up he pulls himself up by the arms, and then by eating, drinking, and sleeping has become so heavy, he is not what he should be. That government is proper that knows what each of the governed is doing. Our mind governs the body. Our mind should have every muscle, every atom of the body under its command. When we move upward, all must come up. And when we turn to the right, all must turn to the right. When we turn to the left, all must turn to the left. Chapter 14, Rhythm. 1. In the fikr, in what rhythm you began, you should continue to breathe. By losing the rhythm, much is lost. There's a note here that says that the fikr is a mystical breathing exercise. Music is the miniature of life's harmony in sound in a concentrated sense. The person who has no rhythm physically cannot walk well. He often stumbles. The breath, the speech, the step, all have rhythm. The person who has no rhythm in his emotions falls easily into a spell, such as laughter or crying or anger or fear. We should practice rhythm in our lives so that we may not be so patient and yielding that everybody takes the best of us, nor so scared nor so carried away by our enthusiasm and frankness that we say things that are undesirable in the world, nor so meek and mild that we fall into flattery, timidity, and cowardice. Then, by and by, we may understand the rhythm of emotions, the rhythm of thoughts, then the rhythm of feeling. Then a person comes into relation with the inner rhythm that is the true meaning of the world. 2. Everything in the world has 2 movements. The moon has its waxing and waning. The sun has its rising and setting. The tide has its flow and ebb. Man has his rise and decline. This shows us that time is not in the watches and the clocks that we have made, but time is the rhythm that is in the whole universe. Chapter 15. The Veena. 1. The Veena is the oldest instrument in the world. Not, of course, in its present form, but in its original form. It is the mother instrument of all instruments in the East, and it is chiefly used for concentration and meditation. The first Veena, an invention of Mahadeva, was a bamboo with gourds attached to it. Guts were used, veins of animals, and all things that could be found in the jungle. When the rishis went into the jungle for their yoga practices, the wish for companionship led them to take first a bamboo and a piece of gut, then to fasten 2 gourds to the bamboo. This was called the Rudra Veena, and on this the rishis played. The birds and deer in the jungle gathered to listen. One of the rishis listened to what the deer said to him. As he was a mystic, he understood the deer's language. He told this in a poem. The deer said, "Make a string of my veins, make a carpet of my skin. But whilst there is still breath in this body, play." There was no carpenter's work on the first Veena. There were no wires. It only had 1 string because the rishis thought that the one sound and not a variety could help their concentration. Later there were 7 strings. The Veena is considered to be the perfect instrument, and 7 is the number of perfection. The gourd is there to lessen the sound, not to augment it, to make it more solid than a sound that goes out more, to make it fuller and less sonorous. Every century has altered the form of the Veena. It is very artificial now. Still, it has kept something of what it was first. When the Veena was taken to the palaces, it was made more elaborate, as you see it. There's a note here that says, this remark shows that a musical performance had taken place, so he's giving a lecture after a musical performance, which some of these are. You may say, why make such a head that is like nothing? There is a great philosophy in it. It has the trunk of the elephant, the jaw of the tiger. It has horns and wings, the neck of a fish, while the eyes, the nose, and the mustache have something of man. This shows that all faces are God's, and God appears in all forms. 2. You wish to hear from me the praise of the Veena, therefore I shall quote the words of the great Indian poet who wrote a praise of the Veena in Sanskrit. Please do not be surprised to hear the interpretation of it. An instrument of gut strings that we produce by looking at it, by touching it, by hearing it, you can be made free even if you kill a Brahmin, which is considered the greatest sin. This instrument was invented by the Lord of Yogis, Shiva, whose name is also Mahadeva. He gave to the world his lifelong experiences in the practice of yoga. He is worshipped in India as a godhead, and his literature is considered holy scripture. He was a very great master of breathing and an ascetic. He lived in the mountains where he sat and breathed the fresh air of the wide horizons of the east and practiced mantras, words or phrases that changed the whole being of man. There, he wanted to make some experiments on himself of higher exaltation by the help of music. What he could do in the forest was to cut a piece of bamboo. He then took 2 pumpkins, hollowed them out, dried them, and fastened them onto the bamboo. Gut strings he got from animals, and these he tied onto the instrument. In this way he made his first veena, and he practiced upon it in solitude. Mahadeva made experiments with the human body and with the mind, considering their condition in the morning, in the midst of the day, in the afternoon, in the night, and when waking at dawn. He found that at every time of the day and night, a particular effect was made upon the human body and spirit, and that the rhythm akin to that particular time should be prescribed psychologically and mystically in order to elevate the soul. So, a psychological science of music was made by Mahadeva, a science of raga, which means emotion. Emotion controlled and utilized to the best purpose. When Parvati, Mahadeva's consort, saw this instrument, she said, "I must invent my veena." So she cut a pumpkin in halves, made a body on them, and produced another kind of veena, the Sarasvati veena. So there are 2 veenas. One is played by men, the other by women. On this latter instrument, not only sharp and flat notes are produced, but also microtones, and in this way, the music becomes rich. But to master the science of microtones, it is so difficult that it takes a lifetime. The musicians of India devote 12 hours of the day to the practice of the different rhythms, improvising upon them. In the end, they produce a psychological effect that is not music, but magic. A music that can thrill a person and that can penetrate the heart of man. It is a dream, a meditation. It is paradise. By hearing it, one feels in a different world. Yet their music is hardly audible. Instead of being played before thousands of people, only 1 or 2 or 3 persons of the same quality and nature should be together to enjoy that music thoroughly. If a foreign element is present, the musician does not feel inspired. You will be amused to hear of a musician who was once invited to play the veena. The musician came and was welcomed. He uncovered his instrument. Then he looked here and there and found some discomfort, some discord. So he covered his veena, saluted, and went out. Those present felt disappointed and begged him to play. But his answer was, "No matter what you give me, I do not feel like playing." This is quite a different thing from making a program months ahead. The musician in the West is bound 6 months beforehand to play a certain program. He's helpless. But in this way, it is not music. It is labor. It is done mechanically. Would you believe that a singer in the East never knows what he's going to sing before he starts singing? He feels the atmosphere of the place and the time, and he begins to sing or to play whatever comes to his mind. I do not mean to say that music of this kind can be universal music. Those musicians have always been rare and found only in some remote parts of India. They are now dying out because of lack of appreciation. Those potentiates, those gurus, those teachers of high inspiration who lived in the past, They appreciated this music. Even in India, people are becoming civilized, and therefore music is dying away. Now there are no more musicians of former times who could make all of those who listened spellbound. They do not exist any longer. Among 1,000,000, there are perhaps 3 or 4, and they will have vanished in a few years. Maybe one day the Western world will awaken to India's music, as now the West is awakening to the poetry of the East and beginning to appreciate such works as those of Rabindranath Tagore. There will come a time when they will ask for music of that kind, and then it will not be found. It will be too late. But there is no doubt that if that music, which is magic, which is built upon a psychological basis, is introduced in the West, it will root out all things as jazz. It will root out all such things as jazz. Very controversial. People seem to spoil their senses. This jazz music is destroying people's delicacy of sense. Thousands every day are dancing to jazz music, and they forget the effect it has upon their spirit, upon their mind, upon their delicate senses. I know of a prince of Rampur who wanted to study music with a great teacher. The teacher said, "I can only teach you on one condition. You are a prince, fond of music. Many musicians will want to show you their talent. I do not want you to hear any musician who is not an accomplished artist, because your sense of music must not be destroyed. It must be preserved for delicate music. It must be able to appreciate its finer intricacies. If that sense is spoiled, instead of going forward, one goes backward. And if music, which is the central theme of the whole human culture, is not helping people go forward, it is a great pity." Veena music has a likeness to the human voice. If you hear the veena played, you will never think that it is an instrument. You cannot imagine that it is an instrument. Veena music is not as magnetic as the music of the human voice, but it is more attractive, more impressive, and all the delicacies of the human voice and the silky structure of it are finished in the sound of the veena. 3. Music has an effect upon animals. I've made experiments with cows and found that they very much liked to listen to the music. There was an old ox in particular that when it heard an instrument played would leave its fodder and come to listen. Birds are very fond of music. I have seen a peacock that when I played the veena before it, would listen and spread out its wings and begin to dance. Then it would follow me, and each day it would come a little nearer. It took such a delight in music that it danced and quite forgot everything else. When I stopped playing, it would come and tap the veena with its beak to get me to come back and play again. Snakes, too, are easily attracted by music, by the Indian flute, a piece of bamboo, or by the veena if they hear it. A special raga is used for charming snakes, but veena players are serious people and would rather charm human beings than snakes. Hello, Mama. We are here in Brooklyn on a very late, snowy Tuesday night. Picking up with chapter 16, the manifestation of sound on the physical sphere. Modern science has discovered recently that on certain plates one can see clearly the impression of sound. It is made visible. But in reality, on all objects, the impression of sound falls clearly, only it is not always visible. It remains for a certain time on any object, and then it disappears. Those who have discovered scientifically the different impressions that are made by sound have found the clear forms of leaves and of flowers and of other things of nature, which is the proof of the belief that the ancient people held, and which is expressed in the Vedanta in the well-known phrase, Nada Brahma, meaning sound, the creator. As we read in the Bible, that first was the Word, and the Word was God, and that first was sound, the Word, and then was light. This only means that the source of creation was sound. In other words, the creative source, in its first step toward manifestation, was audible, and in its next step, it was visible. It also shows that all we see in this objective world, every form, has been constructed by sound. It is the phenomena of sound. When we go further into this subject, we see that from a mystical point of view, every syllable has a certain effect. As the form of every sound is different, so every syllable has a certain effect, and therefore every sound made or word spoken before an object has charged that object with a certain magnetism. This explains to us the method of the healers, teachers, and mystics who, by the power of sound, charged an object with their healing power, with their power of thought. And when that object was given as water or as food, that object brought about a desired result. Besides that, many masters of occult sciences who have communicated with the unseen beings by the power of sound have done still greater things. They have created beings. In other words, they have given a body by the power of sound to a soul, to a spirit, making it into a certain being, which is not yet a physical being, but a being of a higher kind. They called such beings Mawakals, and they worked through these beings, using them in any direction of life toward a certain purpose. The physical effect of sound has also a great influence upon the human body. The whole mechanism, the muscles, the blood circulation, the nerves, are all moved by the power of vibration. As there is resonance for every sound, so the human body is a living resonator for sound. Although by one sound one can produce a resonance in all substances, such as brass and copper, yet there is no greater and more living resonator of sound than the human body. The effect of sound is upon each atom of the body, for each atom resounds on all glands, on the circulation of the blood, and on the pulsation sound has its effect. In India, there is a feast every year in which the people think of the great heroes of the past and mourn over their life's tragedy. Certain instruments are played, certain drums, sometimes very badly, sometimes by one who knows better. There are some people who, on hearing those drums, instantly enter into ecstasy because the sound of the drum goes directly into their whole system, bringing it to a certain pitch where they feel ecstasy. And when they are in ecstasy, they can jump into the fire and come out without being burned. They can cut themselves with a sword and they are instantly healed. They can eat fire and they are not burned by it. One sees it every year at that particular time. They call such a condition hal. Hal means condition, which is an appropriate term for it because on hearing the drum, they think of that condition and they enter into it. In order to go into that trance, they need not be very educated or very evolved. Sometimes they are very ordinary people, but the sound can have such effect upon them that they are moved to higher ecstasy. Now, coming to the question of music and why music has an effect upon a person, why a person by nature likes music. It is not because he is trained in it, or because it is a habit, but because it is a natural effect of sound that it attracts. First, it touches the physical plane. The snake charmers in the East have proved many times that by playing their simple instrument called punji, they can attract the serpents of the vicinity. The sound has this effect upon the physical body of the serpent, and it begins to feel quite different. Through that effect, it is attracted to the sound, even to sacrifice its life, for then it is caught by the snake charmer. It is for this reason that the wise considered the science of sound to be the most important science to use in every condition of life, in healing, in teaching, in evolving, in accomplishing all things in life. It is on this foundation that the science of zikr was developed by the Sufis and that the yogis made mantra shastra. By zikr, it is not meant one particular phrase. By zikr is meant a science of words. Apart from the meaning a word has, even syllables of sound can bring a good result or a disastrous result. Those who know about this can recall several instances in history where, through mistake of a poet who did not use the proper words in the praise of a king, the kingdom was destroyed. And yet, how little one thinks about it if one says, well, I have said it, but I did not mean it. People think that by saying something they have done nothing as long as they did not mean it. But even saying something without meaning has a great effect upon life. The science of sound can be used in education, in business, in industry, in commerce, in politics, in order to bring about desired results. But the best use of this science is made in spiritual evolution. By the power of sound or word, one can evolve spiritually and experience all the different stages of spiritual perfection. Question: can one use music to awaken the soul to mysticism? Answer: music is the best medium. Nothing is better. Music is the closest, the nearest way to God. That is, if one knows which music and how to use it. Question: how do you explain that some people have no feeling for music? Answer: I only explain that feeling is not yet created in them. The day when they begin to feel life, they will begin to enjoy music also. Question: how is the sudden healing brought about of the sword cut made while in ecstasy? Answer: this point was touched upon by a physician in San Francisco, Dr. Albert Abrams. Although all the doctors were against him, he intuitively thought that illnesses could be cured with the help of vibrations. But instead of finding the power of vibration in the word, he wanted to find the power of vibration in electricity. Yet the principle is the same. He took the rate of vibrations of the body, and with the same rate of vibrations of electricity, he treated the elements of the body. He began to get some good results, but it is a subject that will need at least a century to develop fully. He still has representatives. I went to the Institute of Dr. Abrams in San Francisco to see how far they had developed, and I saw that they were using a person as a medium. That person feels the vibrations of the drop of blood that is put in his hand. The vibrations of that drop of blood go through his body, and he feels them in a certain part of his body. In that way, they find out the rate of vibrations of the blood. No doubt it is a vast subject, and this is just the beginning. Therefore, there is still no end to the errors. At the same time, if people could bear it, something might come out of it in many years' time that could be of great use in the medical world. This example shows that when a man can cut himself and at the same time be healed, it only means that he creates by sound such a condition in his body that the vibrations of the body are in such a condition that any wound can be healed immediately. But if the same person is not in that condition, then if there is a cut at that time, he cannot be healed. He must be in that particular condition. The vibrations of his body must be working at a particular rate. If they are not vibrating at that rate, then he will not be healed. There is a school of Sufis in the East called the Rifa'i school. The main object of this school is to increase the power of spirit over matter, and such experiments as eating fire or jumping into the fire or cutting the body are made in order to get power and control over matter. The secret of the whole phenomena is that by the power of words, they try to tune their body to that pitch of vibration where no fire, no cut, nothing can touch it. Because the vibrations of their body are equal to those of the fire, therefore the fire has no effect. Question: in human life, is it possible to hear the soundless sound? Answer: yes. It is by hearing the soundless sound that souls have reached the highest point and have discovered that there is a soundless sound. Question: what do you mean by the soundless sound? Answer: sound is that which is heard by the ears, and soundless sound is audible without the help of the ears. Question: those who hear the soundless sound, are they clear-sighted? Answer: it is not necessary for a person to be born with clear sight or with the hearing of the soundless sound. If a person is born with that tendency, then it is no credit to him. I think that the best thing is to be like everybody else and at the same time to evolve so that one experiences all that is possible, all that is latent in man, giving others the proof that we are not different from everybody else. We are the same, but this is latent in man. Question: by evolving, you get it? Answer: yes. Question: is it possible for a person who is born with a gross nature to become fine? Answer: certainly. Other things apart, even those who have done the zikr in the right way, in 6 weeks' time the vibrations of their body change. In 6 weeks' time, those who do it properly become finer. Take the grossest person, make him do the zikr. In 6 weeks' time, his vibrations will change. Question: in the spoken words, are there vibrations of air, as science teaches, or are there still more inner, finer vibrations? Answer: they are finer vibrations. The vibrations of the air are nothing. Every word has a breath behind it, and every breath has a spiritual vibration. So the action of the breath vibrates physically, yet at the same time, breath itself is an electric current. Breath is not only the air, but an electric current also. Therefore, it is an inner vibration. Chapter 17. The effect of sound on the physical body. Wind instruments, instruments with gut strings and with steel wire, and the two instruments of percussion, drums and cymbals, have each a distinct, different, and particular effect on the physical body. There was a time when thinkers knew this and used sound for healing and for spiritual purposes. It was on that principle that the music of India was based. The different ragas and the modes that these ragas contain were supposed to produce a certain healing and elevating effect. When we consider single notes or sounds, their effect upon the physical body leads us to think deeply on the subject. There are snake charmers, mostly to be found in India, who by playing their instrument, a wind instrument called punji, attract cobras and other snakes from their vicinity. Often this experiment has been made, and one has always found that all kinds of snakes or cobras are attracted on hearing the sound of the punji. First, they come out of the holes in which they live, and there is a certain effect on their nervous system that draws them closer and closer to the sound of the punji. They forget that instinct that is seen in every creature to protect itself from the attack of man or of other creatures. Again, they forget that instinct that is seen in every creature to protect itself from the attack of man or of other creatures. At that time, they absolutely forget. They do not see anyone or anything. Then they are aroused to ecstasy. A cobra begins to raise its head and to move it right and left, and as long as this instrument is played, the cobra continues to move in ecstasy. This shows us that apart from the psychical effect and apart from the spiritual effect that sound has on mankind, there is a physical effect also. From a metaphysical point of view, breath is the life current, prana. This life current exists also in things such as the gut or the string or the skin of the drums. There is also a part of life in these things, and it is to that extent that their life current becomes audible and that it touches the life current of the living creatures and gives it an added life. It is for this reason that the most primitive tribes who have only a drum to play or an instrument to blow get into such a condition by that continual playing of the drum that they enjoy the state of ecstasy. Apart from this, how does the great success of jazz come about? It comes from the same principle. It does not give the brain much to think about in the technicality of music. It does not trouble the soul to think of spiritual things. It does not trouble the heart to feel deeply. Without troubling the heart or the soul, it touches the physical body. It gives a renewed strength by the continuity of a particular rhythm and a particular sound that give people, the generality, a greater strength and vigor and interest than music that strains the mind, making it think. Those who do not wish to be spiritually elevated, who do not believe in spiritual things, and do not wish to trouble, the jazz band leaves alone, yet touching everyone who hears it. When one compares the voice with the instrument, there is no real comparison because the voice is life itself. The movement, the glance, the touch, even the breath that comes from the nostrils do not reach so far, not so far as the voice reaches. There are 3 degrees of breath current. 1 degree is the simple breath that is inhaled and exhaled by the nostrils. This current reaches outside and has a certain effect. A greater degree of it is blowing. When a person blows from his lips, then that breath current is more intensely directed. Therefore, healers who have understood this principle make use of it. The third degree, in which the breath is most intense, is sound. Because in that degree, the breath, coming in the form of sound, is vitalized. In the Near East, among Orthodox Christians and among Armenians, there is a custom not to use an organ in the church. They use a chord or sound made by 10 or 12 persons sitting there with closed lips. Anyone who has heard it will say that they are right. The sound of the organ is most artificial in comparison with the sound that the voices of 10 or 12 persons produced with closed lips. This has such a wonderfully magic effect. It reaches so far and so deeply into the heart of man, and it produces such a religious atmosphere among them that one feels that there is no necessity for an organ. This is a natural organ that God has made. Brahmins, when they study the Vedas, even now, do not study only what is written there or the meaning of it. They study the pronunciation of each syllable, of each word, of each sound, and they study for years and years. It is not that the Brahmin hears the sound once with the ears and thinks, I have learned it. No, he thinks that 1,000 repetitions of the word will one day produce that magnetism, that electricity, that life current that is necessary, and it only comes by repetition. Now this life current that comes through the breath and manifests through the voice and touches another person, what action does it take? It touches the 5 senses, the sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell, the sense of taste, and the sense of touch, although it comes directly through the sense of hearing. It is not true that a person hears sound only through his ears. He hears sound through every little pore of his body. It permeates through his whole being, and according to its particular influence, it either slows the rhythm or it quickens the rhythm of the blood circulation. It either wakens the nervous system or it soothes it. It arouses a person to higher passions or it calms him by bringing him peace. In accordance with the sound and its influence, a certain effect is produced. Therefore, the knowledge of sound can place in the hand of a person a magical instrument with which to wind, tune, control, and utilize the life of another person to the best advantage. The ancient singers used to experience the effect of their spiritual practices upon themselves first. They used to sing one note for about half an hour and observe the effect of the same note upon all the different centers of their own body, noting what life current it produced, how it opened the intuitive faculties, how it created enthusiasm, how it gave added energy, how it soothed, and how it healed. So for them, it was not a theory, it was an experience. When this is not understood and when people only know that sound has something to do with the body, they think that they must make some use of it, and instead of making the right use of it, they make the wrong use. The Maharaja of Baroda, hearing of this science, thought he should introduce music into the hospitals. Singers were sent there who had never learned what effect sound or song has. When the singers began their technical traditional songs while the patients were suffering pains and tortures, the patients said, "Oh, take them away, throw them into the river." But it was Maharaja's order that the singers were to sing. After a week, the patients were far more ill, and the Maharaja had to send another order. No more music is wanted. In my travels, I have seen now the same thing. There are some people here and there who think that music has a great effect upon patients, on health, but instead of using the right music, they use the wrong music, and its effect is to make people more ill. Sound becomes visible in the form of radiance. This shows that the same energy that goes into the form of sound before it becomes visible is absorbed by the physical body. In that way, the physical body recuperates and becomes charged with new magnetism. By a keen study of psychology, you will find that singers have a greater magnetism than the average person. Because of their own practicing, their voice makes an effect upon themselves, and they produce electricity in themselves. In that way, they are charged with a new magnetism every time they practice. This is the secret of the singer's magnetism. As to the question, which is the wrong and which is the right use of sound, it all depends upon the particular case. In one case, a certain sound may be rightly used. In another case, the same sound may be wrongly used. But whether it was right or wrong will be seen by the harmonious and inharmonious effects it produces. When a pitch is a natural pitch of the voice, and a person sings a note in that pitch, in any pitch that is quite natural to him, that will be a source of that person's own healing as well as that of others. But the person who has found out the keynote of his own voice has the key to his whole life. That person, through the keynote of his own voice, can then wind his own being and help others. There are, however, many occasions when this much knowledge is not enough, because this knowledge only concerns oneself. One knows what is one's own note and the natural pitch of one's voice. The great drawback today in the world of song is that people are going far away from what is called the natural voice, and this is brought about by commercialism. They have made a hall for 100 persons, then for 500, and then for 5,000 persons. A man must shout in order to make 5,000 people hear him, in order to have a success that can be had at the ticket office. But that magic charm of the voice is in the natural voice. Every person is gifted. God has given him a certain pitch, a natural note, and if that pitch develops, and he develops that natural note, it is a magic. He can perform a miracle. But he must think about the hall where he has to sing, and of how loud he must shout. There was a man from India visiting Paris. For the first time in his life, he went to the opera to hear the music, and he was trying hard to enjoy it. The first thing he heard was a soprano who was doing her best, and then came the tenor, or the baritone, and he had to sing with her. So this man became very annoyed and said, "Now look, he has come to spoil it." When we come to the essence and the inner principle of sound, the closer to nature we keep it, the more powerful, the more magical it becomes. Every man and woman has a certain pitch of voice. Then the voice producer says, "No, this is alto, soprano, tenor, baritone, or bass." He limits that which cannot be limited. How can there be so many voices? There are as many voices as there are souls. They cannot be classified. As soon as he is classified, that person is obliged to sing in that pitch. If his pitch is different, he does not know it. If his voice is higher, he does not sing in that pitch, because the voice producer says, "This is a soprano." That person cannot be anything else. Besides that, a person has to depend upon what the composer has written. The composer never knew the voice of that particular person. The composer wrote only for a distinct pitch, either this one or that one. When a person has to sing in that pitch that is prescribed, then he loses the natural pitch he had. Apart from singing, even in speaking, among 100 persons, you will find one who speaks in his natural voice and 99 who imitate. They imitate someone else They do not know it. The same thing you find in grown-up people, you will find in little children. The tendency in a little child is to change and to imitate. Every 5 or 10 days, every month, a child changes his way of speaking, his voice, his words. Many things he changes. And where does he learn it? From the children in school. He sees a child walking in some way, or making gestures, or frowning, or he hears it speaking in a certain way. He does not realize it, but he has heard it, and he does the same thing. So he goes on changing. In the same way, every person, also without knowing it, changes his voice, and so the natural voice is lost. To retain one's natural voice is a great power in itself, but one cannot always retain it. In order to have a powerful effect with one's voice and one's sound, one does not have to be a singer. What one has to do is to practice the breath in different ways. One must know how to breathe. One must then know how to blow. One must then learn how to make a sound, how to say a word. If one practices in these 3 ways, one will attain that power that is latent in every soul. One need not be a singer, but for every person it is necessary that he should give some part of the day, even the shortest time he can give, 5, 10, or 15 minutes, to his voice, to the development of his voice. Question: how does one find one's key note once it is lost? Answer: but where is it lost? It is only lost from one's view. It is not altogether lost. It is just the same when people say that a person has lost his soul, but the person himself is the soul. How can the soul be lost? The key note is there. One must discover it. One must find it, just as the soul is there, but hardly one person among so many finds it. Question: how can one find one's keynote? Answer: by trying to find it. Question: how can one be sure that the note one believes to be the keynote of one's being is really the keynote? Answer: belief is the first truth, and faith is the last truth. You must begin from the first and end with the last. Question: has not every nerve its own sound? Answer: yes. It has its own vibration. You may call it sound. Question: does the sound we hear on the radio produce the same effect as the natural sound? Answer: yes. It is the natural sound, just the same. Coming through a medium, coming through an instrument, that much is lost from it. But it is a natural sound, just the same. Question: how can one best check the tendency to imitate? Answer: the tendency to imitate has some use also. If we did not imitate, we should not know the language. If we did not imitate, we should not be what we are. Therefore, imitating is not a bad thing as long as we do not imitate too much. One must know what to imitate and what not to imitate. If one went blindly imitating anything one saw, then one would imitate both right and wrong. Question: if a singer strains his voice, it is easily heard and it's... If a singer strains his voice, it is easily heard and it spoils everything. Answer: that is quite true. But to strain the voice is one thing, and to develop the voice, if it can be called a development to make an unnatural voice out of a natural voice, is a different thing. It is not a question of straining voice. It is making the voice quite different from what was given by nature, then the magic is lost. Nature has given a certain kind of voice. That voice represents the spirit, the soul, the heart, the intellect, everything that is in man. Evolution in man is to be seen in his voice, and when that voice is changed, then it is different. One need not strain one's voice in order to become unnatural. It is very easy to become unnatural. Question: is not the voice developed by zikr? Answer: well, that is the best way one can do it.